Imagine feeling a quiet, hollow emptiness inside, even when you're surrounded by people. Nobody seems to truly grasp what you're actually going through. And this isn't physical solitude, it's something much deeper and more profound. This invisible disconnection makes you feel that no matter how much you try to explain what you're experiencing, nobody truly comprehends it. Today we're going to discuss that which isn't always spoken, but is deeply and powerfully felt. It's the sensation of being emotionally alone, even when you're in the company of others. No, this isn't about guesswork or assumptions. This is about a profound and transformative process. It's the journey of looking within yourself to understand why we sometimes feel like nobody truly sees us. One of the great voices in personal development, Louise Hay, taught us that our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs shape the way we live our lives and relate to others. When we talk about emotional isolation, this becomes even more obvious, because there is nothing more unsettling than feeling like no one understands you, not even the people who are supposed to care about you the most. You've surely experienced it before. You're emotionally exhausted. You've been feeling at your limit for days, and that constant pressure in your head returns once again. Migraines that prevent you from thinking clearly. Do you dare to talk about it? You tell someone close to you, "I can't take it anymore today, my soul aches." And the response you receive is, "Take something, you'll feel better, it'll pass." Or even worse, "You must be overreacting." At that moment, you don't just feel misunderstood, you feel invisible. You realize that your pain doesn't fit into the other person's world, and that is one of the hardest blows the soul can receive. Exposing yourself with sincerity and not being received. That too is emotional isolation. It's not just about being physically alone, it's about feeling that even when you explain, no one is really listening to you. It's having a body that screams what your mouth keeps silent while everyone else goes on with their lives as if nothing is happening. Louise Hay invites us to look into that silent void and begin healing it from within. But according to Louise Hay, this is not an accident. People don't emotionally distance themselves consciously. They do it because many times they are disconnected from themselves. The way someone behaves with you, what they show and what they hide, is deeply linked to how they feel inside. And here is the key point. Our inner world is inevitably reflected in our relationships. That's why when someone doesn't listen to you, when they minimize what you feel, when they respond to you with coldness, it's not always because they don't care about you, it's because that person is also fighting their own internal battle. Sometimes the person who makes you feel the most alone is the one who is the most disconnected from their own emotions and without knowing it, projects their emptiness onto you. This is how emotional isolation is built. You feel something very deep, you express it, and the other person has no internal space to receive it, and there you are again, feeling alone, even when you're not physically by yourself. Throughout our lives, we have learned to interpret gestures, words, and silences. We have tried to read between the lines what others feel, hoping to understand what is sometimes left unsaid. But as Louise Hay reminds us, it's not just about observing the external, it's about paying attention to what that awakens inside of us. Because when you live in emotional isolation, everything intensifies. An evasive glance can hurt more than 1,000 words. An automatic response can feel like a wall. And what hurts the most isn't what the other person does, but what you begin to believe about yourself based on those interactions. Our relationships act as mirrors, reflecting not only what the other person feels, but what you believe you deserve. And yes, inside you there is a wound that says, "I am not enough, nobody understands me," or "I am alone in this." You end up seeing exactly that reflected in your relationships. Emotional isolation doesn't always begin externally. Many times it starts with what we have begun to think about ourselves in silence. We often forget the most important thing, taking care of our mind and our heart. We live for others, to meet expectations, to function. But when was the last time you stopped to ask yourself how you really feel? Are you speaking to yourself with love, or are you demanding things from a place of guilt and judgment? Because if you don't treat yourself with compassion, if you don't allow yourself to feel and heal, it is inevitable that your relationships will become filled with insecurities, fears, and painful silences. It could be that the disconnection you feel with others begins with the disconnection you have with yourself. Emotional isolation often doesn't start with others, it begins when you stop listening to yourself. The people who come into our lives don't do so by chance. Many times they are a reflection of what we believe we deserve, even when we are not entirely conscious of it. If deep inside you there is a voice that says nobody understands me, I am not enough, or they are going to reject me, it is likely that you will end up surrounded by relationships that, without wanting to, confirm exactly that. And it's not because the world is against you, but because we are projecting outward what we have not healed within. If you yourself don't believe that you deserve love, affection, or understanding, how are you going to sustain relationships that truly offer it to you? Emotional isolation, that feeling of being disconnected even in company, often arises from there, from not recognizing yourself as worthy of being seen, heard, and valued. And that is why true transformation does not begin with others, it begins with you, with what you think and feel about yourself when nobody is looking. What we often don't understand is that behind every attitude, even those that hurt or confuse us the most, there is a personal history, an emotional burden, an unresolved wound, an internal narrative that person has built throughout their life. That coldness, that distance, that apparent indifference doesn't always have to do with you. It may be that person simply doesn't know how to connect because they have lived for years feeling that expressing what they feel is not safe. Every behavior is the result of beliefs, fears, and experiences that have left a mark, and even though it hurts you, it is not always a rejection of you. Sometimes it's just the consequence of someone who also learned how to survive. If you want to understand why you feel so disconnected from others, the first question isn't what are they thinking, but what am I thinking about myself? Emotional isolation doesn't always start outside. Many times it is born in that silent internal dialogue that you carry with you day after day. It is that little voice that tells you that you are overreacting, that you shouldn't feel what you feel, that no one will understand it. And the longer you live disconnected from your own emotions, the more difficult it becomes to connect with others. So take a moment and ask yourself honestly, am I being kind to myself? Am I invalidating what I feel before someone else has the opportunity to do so? Healing that isolation begins by recognizing it, by daring to feel, to listen to yourself, and finally giving yourself permission to be with yourself without judging. You've surely noticed that there are people who act in ways that baffle you. They say one thing but do another. They promise closeness but maintain a distance, and you get stuck in that limbo without knowing what they really feel or think. That disconnection confuses and hurts. But if you understand the principles that Louise Hay shared throughout her life, you begin to look beyond the surface. You start to see that it's not just about what someone says or does, but about what they carry inside. Each person carries an emotional history, a network of beliefs, wounds, and unresolved fears that shape their way of relating. And many times that apparent disinterest or coldness has nothing to do with you. It has to do with their inability to connect, because they haven't even learned to connect with themselves. Louise Hay used to say that you can't give to others what you don't give to yourself, and it's true. If a person doesn't know how to inhabit their emotions, they won't know how to inhabit yours either. Emotional isolation is nourished by those gaps between what we feel and what we express, between what we need and what we show. But when you start to look with compassion, not just at the other person but also at yourself, a door opens to heal that distance. That inner world that we all carry, full of beliefs, wounds, and unresolved emotions, is inevitably reflected in how we relate. Therefore, when someone is cold or distant with you, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, what did I do wrong? Why are they treating me like this? Why aren't they responding with the same affection that I give them? But as Louise Hay taught, that behavior often has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what that person is experiencing inside. Imagine that you are in a relationship and you have been feeling emotionally disconnected for days. You talk to them, you try to reach out, you try to get closer, and you only receive monosyllables, evasive answers, or an "I'm tired, I don't have the energy to talk." Your mind begins to fill with doubts. You think you did something wrong, that you no longer matter to them, but what you don't see is that person is battling their own inner world, perhaps with anxiety, guilt, fear of commitment, or a story they never dared to tell. And there you are with an open heart, feeling alone in front of someone who is physically present but emotionally absent. That is emotional isolation. And in that silence, in that coldness, there isn't necessarily a lack of love, there is a lack of connection with oneself. Louise Hay taught us that each person acts from the level of love, fear, or pain that they have inside. And when you understand that, you stop taking everything personally and begin to see things from a different place, with more compassion, and above all, with more clarity to take care of yourself. Our beliefs are powerful. They not only influence how we see ourselves, but also what we attract and tolerate in our relationships. If deep down you believe that you are not worthy of love, you will find yourself surrounded by relationships where love is scarce or given in small measures. If you doubt your worth, you will begin to notice how others do too, not because you deserve it, but because your unconscious energy gives them permission to do so. And the most painful thing is that many times we don't even notice it. We get used to accepting the bare minimum, to justifying emotional absences, to enduring indifference disguised as "that's just the way I am." But all of that, in some way, is validating what you yourself believe you deserve. Emotional isolation then becomes an invisible cycle. You believe that nobody understands you, and you end up relating to people who truly don't. You believe that you are bothering others when you express what you feel, and so you remain silent. And then you surround yourself with relationships where silence is the norm. It's like a mirror that doesn't lie. What you see in others is often an extension of what you carry within, and that's why what irritates you the most, what hurts you the most, what makes you feel the most disconnected, is often just the echo of a part of you that is asking to be seen, recognized, and healed. The real change begins when you take responsibility for that reflection, when instead of blaming the world for what you don't receive, you decide to heal the part of you that believed it didn't deserve it. Everything we experience with others, especially in moments of pain or disconnection, is an invitation to look within. Emotional isolation doesn't always show up as a loud scream. Sometimes it's a doubt that lingers after a conversation, a message that never arrived, a glance that avoided yours, a silence that felt like rejection. And it's easy to blame, to think that the other person was cold, unfair, or cruel. But what if that experience is trying to show you something deeper? What if that emptiness you felt is a reflection of a corner of yourself that has not yet been embraced? Perhaps you still haven't forgiven yourself for something in the past. Perhaps there is an old wound that says you are not enough, and every gesture of indifference reactivates it. Or maybe you are so used to protecting yourself from pain that you no longer know how to receive love without suspicion. In those moments, instead of pointing outward, ask yourself honestly, what part of me is asking for attention? What belief? What emotion? What story am I ready to let go of? The key is not to change the other person, but to discover what that experience is teaching you about yourself. Because even in the deepest isolation, there is a door that leads back home to you, to your truth, to your healing. This process of introspection is not a condemnation, it is a profound act of self-love. It's not about looking for culprits or criticizing yourself for feeling what you feel. It's about having the courage to look within and recognize that behind every emotional challenge, there is a seed of healing, an opportunity to let go of beliefs that no longer serve you and to reconnect with your true essence. Louise Hay said it clearly, "I am willing to let go of the patterns of fear that isolate me. I am worthy of love and acceptance, exactly as I am now. I am open to new ways of thinking that bring me closer to emotional well-being." Every time you choose to look at yourself with compassion instead of judgment, you are breaking the cycle of emotional isolation. You are returning to yourself, to that internal space where you can give yourself what you have so often waited for from others, understanding, presence, and kindness. And from there, everything begins to transform. If you have ever felt hurt or confused by the way someone treats you, pause, breathe, and reflect. Maybe that person is not the root of your pain. Perhaps what that relationship is doing is showing you in all its rawness something that you carry inside, something that you haven't wanted to see, something that you haven't yet completely healed. Emotional isolation is not always solitude. Sometimes it's being in front of someone and feeling invisible, not because that person doesn't see you, but because you have stopped seeing yourself with love. That's where everything begins, in your relationship with yourself. Do you speak to yourself with respect? Do you give yourself time to listen to yourself? Do you take care of yourself, or do you just survive? Starting to work on self-love is not a luxury or a trend. It is a vital necessity if you want to stop feeling disconnected from the world. Because when you start to truly love yourself, not with words but with actions, something changes within, and that change is reflected externally in your boundaries, in your peace, in what you choose, and in what you are no longer willing to allow. You may not be able to change how others act, but you can change how you treat yourself. And when you do, that isolation that seemed so big begins to slowly dissolve. This is an opportunity to go deeper, not to fix others, but to heal what still lives inside of you. because when you feel emotionally isolated, the easiest thing is to point outward, but the most powerful thing is to look inward. That emptiness, that disconnection, that feeling of not being understood, are signs that there is something pending in you that needs love, attention, and truth. And when you decide to attend to it, something changes. It's no longer about changing those around you, but about transforming the way you see yourself, speak to yourself, and choose yourself. The true power to change your relationships is not in controlling the external, but in transforming your perception, your beliefs, and your energy. Because when you change, everything around you begins to align with that new vision. If you start to think, I deserve to be heard, I deserve relationships where I can be myself, I deserve to feel emotionally accompanied, then little by little you will attract people and situations that confirm that truth. Healing emotional isolation is not immediate, but it begins with a decision to stop expecting everything from others and to start giving yourself what you have needed for so long. Louise Hay invites us to look inward with honesty and to recognize how our beliefs about love, self-esteem, and forgiveness profoundly shape the way we relate. When you feel emotionally isolated, it may seem like the problem is external, but many times that emptiness is a reflection of the ideas you have internalized about yourself and what you believe you deserve. If you carry the belief that love is scarce, that you must earn it, or that showing vulnerability is a risk, it is natural that your relationships become cold, distant, or superficial, and not because there aren't people willing to truly see you, but because you yourself, from those beliefs, disconnect before allowing yourself to receive. But when you begin to heal your own thoughts, when you give yourself permission to question those old ideas that you learned, perhaps in childhood, perhaps in a moment of pain, something is released, and in that new internal openness, you begin to attract people who are not only present, but who know how to stay emotionally. People who don't judge you for feeling, who aren't scared if you cry, who can listen to you without trying to correct you. Your true self doesn't need masks or defenses, it just needs space to express itself. And when that space is born within you, the world begins to respond with the same harmony. The important thing here is not to try to decipher others as if they were an enigma. The truly transformative thing is to understand that every situation you live through, especially the ones that hurt you the most, are opportunities to grow, to look within, to heal. If you feel confused, if you can't understand why someone behaves in a certain way with you, maybe the question isn't what is that person thinking, but something much deeper. What unresolved thoughts, emotions, or wounds am I carrying that prevent me from seeing this relationship clearly? Because when you are trapped in emotional isolation, your perception becomes distorted. You become hypersensitive to silences. Gestures that you didn't notice before affect you. You interpret coldness where there may be fear, and you end up creating a story from the wound, not from the truth. Healing within you not only gives you clarity, it gives you freedom. Because when you stop looking for answers externally and focus on understanding what is still asking for attention within you, everything begins to organize itself differently. And many times by healing your internal vision, you see what used to only cause you pain with more compassion and with healthy boundaries. Love begins with oneself. And this is not just a pretty phrase, it is an essential truth when you have lived feeling emotionally alone. Because as long as you seek outside what you don't give to yourself inside, you will continue to attract half-hearted relationships, people who don't know how to stay, who don't know how to listen, who don't know how to see you. But when you start to treat yourself with respect, to speak to yourself with kindness, to validate yourself even when no one else does, something changes. That energy you emit from self-love begins to act as a filter. And the people who are not in tune with your new way of seeing yourself simply move away. Instead, other beings arrive who value you, who are not afraid of your sensitivity, who know how to listen without judging and stay without running away. People who don't fill voids but who share with you from a place of fullness. Because when you choose yourself, life also begins to choose you, and the emotional isolation that once seemed like a condemnation becomes a memory, the beginning of a journey back to you, where you don't need to beg for connection because you already carry it with you. Therefore, if you feel that people don't understand you, if you notice that they respond with coldness, or that they move away just when you need closeness the most, ask yourself honestly, how am I treating myself? Emotional isolation doesn't always come from the outside, sometimes it starts within, in that internal dialogue where you judge yourself, minimize yourself, or demand more of yourself than you can give. And from that energy, without realizing it, you begin to attract relationships that repeat the same pattern. People who don't listen to you, who invalidate you, who make you feel that what you are going through is not that big of a deal. If you are hard on yourself, it is easy for others to be too. If you don't give yourself space to feel, it is likely that you are surrounded by relationships where showing vulnerability feels uncomfortable, or even threatening. That is one of the great drivers of emotional isolation, learning to silence what you feel,
because every time you expressed it, something or someone made you feel that it was wrong. But the reality is that there is nothing wrong with feeling. What hurts is not the emotion, but having lived it in solitude. That's why if you feel that disconnection today, don't take it as a condemnation, take it as a signal that it's time to change the way you speak to yourself, accompany yourself, and support yourself. Because when you treat yourself with love, respect, and patience, the world begins to respond in a different way. Every emotion we feel, even the most uncomfortable ones, the ones that squeeze our chests or fill us with silence, is an opportunity to get to know ourselves better. We are not broken for feeling, we are alive, and feeling deeply is not a weakness, it is a call from the soul asking for attention. If someone has hurt you, or left you with that feeling of emptiness that you don't know how to explain, the easiest thing is to focus on what they did or didn't do. But in reality, that moment is not there just to point at the other person, it is there to bring you back to yourself. Louise Hay invites us to stop using pain as an excuse to close ourselves off, and to start seeing it as an opportunity for transformation. It's not about justifying others' behaviors, but about understanding that every emotional experience is a clue, a reflection, a door to a part of you that you still haven't healed. When someone ignores you, when they make you feel that your emotions are a nuisance, it is natural to feel emotional isolation. But that isolation can also be showing a part of you that learned not to express, not to bother, not to take up space, a part that has been waiting for a long time to be rescued by you. Growth doesn't begin when everything is going well. It begins when you decide to stop hiding from what you feel, when you choose to stop blaming and instead ask yourself with love, what part of me needed to go through this to wake up? What old wound is asking to be released through this experience? Emotional isolation, although it hurts, can become the portal to your true connection with yourself, with your history, with your power to heal, and from there you will begin to build relationships that are no longer based on need, but on authenticity. Now I want to ask you, how did you feel listening to this? Do you feel that these words helped you put a name to that feeling you've been carrying inside for a long time? I would love to read your thoughts in the comments. This is a safe space where you can write whatever you want without feeling judged. We are here to support each other, listen to each other, and grow together. If this resonated with you, give it a like and share it with someone who might also be feeling alone inside. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We are building a community where self-love, emotional healing, and true connection are at the center of everything. Thank you for being here, for giving yourself this space, for allowing yourself to feel and start to heal. And I want to say goodbye with an emotional phrase. When I feel alone, I hug myself with love. I am my own source of affection, and I am learning to be there for myself. I send you a big hug. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, you are never as alone as you think. Your most important connection begins within.